Vokey wedges are renowned for being the best in the game. We have many of the top players in the world using Vokey wedges. We've even got Rory McIlroy using a Vokey wedge, and he's contracted to TaylorMade. So in this video, we're going to review the SM10 wedges, the new wedges from Vokey. So let's first off talk about some of the tech in these Vokey wedges. Now, Vokey's been renowned with the spin mill grooves. No different this year. We've got the spin mill grooves. They've refined that process a little bit through the laser cutting of these grooves just to make sure they're as sharp as they possibly can be. The other thing that Vokey's looked at is the center of gravity. What center of gravity does in a wedge, it can change and manipulate the flight. Now, contrary to what a lot of people believe, with wedges, the best players in the world really flight those wedges down and get loads of spin. So what they've done in these new SM10s is just refine the center of gravity somewhat. So on the higher lofted wedges, that CG is going to be placed slightly differently just to lower that flight, and that's what the best players in the world want. They want more of a flighted wedge shot that spins. Now, in some of the other wedges as well, what they've done is made the CG a little bit more heel bias. What does that mean? Well, we don't want the wedge to go in left. So a lot of the times we find with wedges that they might go a little bit left. That's why you'll see a lot of tall guys playing a flatter lie. Now what they've done is just move that CG on some of the options, a little bit more heel bias. So what that means is it's gonna favor missing right, if anything. We don't want to see that left miss. A lot of better players with the wedges just hate missing left. So they just refined it. It's a subtle tweak. Now, the other thing they've changed in these Vokey wedges is the profile. So in the longer stuff, like the 48, the 52, that profile is going to be a little bit more iron light, a little bit more slimmed down. Whereas as we go more into the lofted wedges, your sand wedge, your lob wedge, we're going to see a bigger profile. So that footprint of the wedge is going to be a little bit larger, and it just blends a little bit better through the set, especially with those higher lofted wedges. When you want to play open shots, you want more of a full face, and that bigger profile really allows for that. So let's get into the performance of the wedge. Now, the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the feel. Now, the Vokey wedges, they are cast. They're not forged like some wedges, so you may expect them to be a little less soft than some of the forged options, but honestly, the feel of these wedges, to say they are cast, is absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely love how soft they come off the face. Feel is so good. And that's really important for a wedge. You want nice feel and touch off them. Now, in terms of what they're doing performance-wise, they're sitting exactly where I'd expect. On full wedge shots, we're seeing spins of like 10,000, which is bang on what I'd expect to see. And then those shorter shots, I just hit one there about 50 yards. We're seeing like 3,000 to 4,000 revs of spin on the quad, exactly how I'd want it. I'm also seeing a really nice launch angle, nice and low. We're not flighting them up in the air. Again, what we want to see. So in terms of feel and flight, fantastic. Just what we'd expect from a Vokey. Do I see any difference between that and the SM9? Fractionally. You can tell the difference. I did have the SM9s, and you can tell a subtle difference in terms of the launch angles. Feel does feel a little bit softer, but I do think they are a genuine upgrade from the SM9s. Now, the one thing that I want to talk about a little bit more about these Vokey wedges is around the greens and why they are probably the best wedge in terms of what the offerings are in the market. And that's all to do with the bounce and the grind option. So let's head around the green. For me, where Vokey wedges really excel is the different loft and grind options. And I think it's a really underestimated part of wedges and why people should get fit for the wedges. Now, grinds are very dependent on the style of play, how you hit those wedge shots, and also the turf conditions. Now, for me, this is where Vokey really excels because they have so many different grinds and bounce options depending on your style of play. This is for me where they are the best wedges and why they are so common in tall players' bags, because they have that different versatility for different golf courses. So for instance, we've got this shot here where we're in the lovely British winter time where the ground's very, very soft. Now, normally a shot of this distance, I'd probably take my 60-degree wedge, but because the turf is so wet, what I've done is I've actually got a 54-degree here with 14 degrees of bounce. That's what we're seeing with a lot of the tall players now. They play in a sand wedge or a gap wedge with a lot of bounce for these sorts of shots. And this is where Vokey's really good, and we'll talk about the 60 that I'd play in the Vokey, just to give you an idea of the the different grinds and how you can play around with it to maximize your own game. So we've got the 54 degree here. It's got 14 degrees of bounce, and because the turf is just very, very sodden at the minute, that 14 degrees of bounce just allows a little bit more of a rudder through the turf. Whereas if I'd use my 60 with 8 degrees of bounce, it just digs in a little bit. Now, what's great about the Vokeys is because we have all these options in terms of the grind, is if we're playing in summer where we might play a little bit more links golf, or when I go out to the States, then I can change that grind up. I might use something with a little lower bounce. I might use a T or an L grind, or something like the K grind if I struggle out of bunkers. There's so many different options depending on your game. So you've got, go through them, you've got the K grind, you've got that in a high bounce, a low bounce. So if you struggle out of bunkers, very, very good club. You've got the T grind, that's great for tight turf and somebody who doesn't want a lot of leading edge coming up off the ground when you open up the face. You've got the M grind, which is just an all-round versatile grind for your lob wedge. You've got your D grind, which is great if you want to open up the face, and then you want a little bit more effective bounce there. And then in the lower clubs, you've got the F grind, which I've got here in the 54, which is more designed for full shots. You've also got the S grind, which can go in your higher clubs and your lower wedges. Again, quite a versatile grind. You can open that a little bit up with the ribbon on the back. You've got all these different options and you can play around with them. You know, they've got these different options in different bounces as well. So it means that you've got loads of versatility in those wedge shots, whereby, like I say, we can go here. I've got the sand wedge in quite a high bounce in 14 degrees for when I'm playing in quite muddy conditions. And then when we are playing a little bit firmer conditions, I can go to an M grind, which is slightly less bounce, but it won't dig in as much when we are playing on firmer turf. So let me just show you what happens when I play the 8 degrees bounce in the M grind on my 60 when I've got some wet turf. So now we've got the 60, 8 degrees bounce, slightly lower bounce than the 54 there on the 14F. And I just want to show you why it's so important. So I took quite hefty divots still with that 14 degrees of bounce. But you can see there, that's prime example why grind and bounce is so important. I've not quite caught that. It's dug really heavily in the turf, very, very deep divot, and then it's come up miles short. And you can feel that interaction between the ground and the club head. Now, a lot of people will negate that and think it's all technique, but obviously it is a little bit technique, but it becomes really difficult when you're not playing the right wedges and grinds for the right turf conditions. And that's where these SM10s are fantastic, because you can mix and match. You can even use different options in terms of your 54s for one type of shot, your 58s for another, all different versatility options. That's what I'd really recommend and get fitted. And that's why I think the Vokeys are probably the best wedge, not because of the performance necessarily, but because the difference in grinds and bounce options that allow you to hit all these different shots. You saw there how I just completely missed it because I was playing the wrong grind for that shot. It wasn't necessarily the wrong club in terms of a 60, but 8 degrees of bounce there was just too little for that lie. It's muddy, it's wet, so I need to go to the 14. That's really it with the Vokeys. I think the grind options are the best in the business, and that's why I think the Vokeys are probably the best wedges in terms of that. Performance wise, you do have really good performance from the Pings, from the TaylorMades, but the Vokeys just take it for me, especially for those grinds and those different bounce options. It just allows you to have real tools in your wedge selection. So if you combine that with good lessons and fitting, you can figure out this shot requires this wedge, this bounce, and you'd be surprised how much easier you can make the short game. So for me, the SM10s, just like any Vokeys, fantastic wedges. The best thing about them is the grind options, especially some of the WedgeWorks options that I'm sure you probably checked out. They're phenomenal. You can get all customization and everything. Great options there. So thumbs up from me. If you've liked this video, please give it a like, subscribe, and feel free to ask me any questions in the comment section.